he looked at me and he says, Larry, you don't know Jackie? And I said, well, no, I don't. He said, well, you should. She went to school with you. She was a year behind me at Wiley. So at work all that day, I couldn't get Jackie out on the line. So on the way home, I stopped at the first payphone. I looked up her telephone number and I called her. I mean, that's the first time I laid eyes on her well, ever. And we got talking, and just out of the clear blue sky, I just said, are you busy Saturday? And she said, no. I said, would you like to go out? And she said, yes. So October 20th, 1963 was our first date. Well, we went to see Lawrence of Arabia, and if you saw that picture, it was a long picture. So when it was over, there's not much to do in Terre Haute. So I'm taking her home, and Jackie was doing what she does best. She was talking. But that particular night, she was talking on deaf ears because I was listening to what my heart was telling me. And my heart was telling me, you can't let this one get away. So when I took her up to the door that night, I asked her out for the following weekend, and she said yes. And after that, every spare minute I had, I was with Jackie. Then on November the 23rd, we was going to the movie again, because again, there's not much to do in Terre Haute. But I was taking her to Tucker Steakhouse for dinner, and we got there, and the waiter took our order, and as soon as he left, I excused myself to go to the men's room, but instead I went to the kitchen and knocked on the door, and the waiter came. And at Tucker Steakhouse, they served your steak and everything with a silver plate with the silver lid, the dome on it. Well, I went down in the afternoon, and I was doing what my heart was telling me. I bought a ring for her. Now, you got to think, this was only my 4th date with her.
Oh.
So I said, can you bring this out? About a couple of minutes as soon as I sat down. Well, I went back and sat down, and I looked at Jackie and I said, I got you something special tonight. And she said, well, what is it? And I said, well, you'll find out. By then the waiter came and he set this silver plate down in front of her, and she says, well, I don't want to eat anything before you get your meal. And I said, well, she said, did you get one? I said, well, no, I didn't get one, but I said, is this something special from you? I said, you're going to have to take the lid off to see it. Well, she took the lid off, and her eyes focused on that ring. And for the first time in 51 years, my wife was lost for words. She just stared at that ring. And I'm sitting over there. She didn't look up at me. She was just staring at the ring. And I got thinking, well, I was doing what my heart told me to do, but maybe I haven't thought much about what her heart was telling her. And she still didn't look up. So I got up, I went around the table, and I took the ring out. She didn't look at me, she just followed that ring. And I took her hand, and I got down on one knee in Tucker Steakhouse, held her hand out, and I said, Jackielarry, Sisson, will you marry me? Nothing. She just looked at the ring and didn't look at me and everything. And I'm saying to myself, well, I'm on one knee. I have to get down on both knees and beg her. Finally, she looked at me, and not a word came out of her mouth, but she went. So I put the ring on, we had our meal, and I looked at Jackie and I said, we're going to have to hurry, we'll be late for the movie. She says, first time she opened her mouth since I put the ring on, she says, we're going home, I want to tell my mother. So we went home, and her mother was in the kitchen just finishing up dishes, because she ran in and showed her mother the ring. Of course, you know, they embraced each other and start crying and everything. I'm standing there. There were some tissues there, and I started handing out the tissues to them. And they was crying and hugging. All of a sudden, her mother let go of her. She came over and gave me a big hug and a kiss. Then back she went to Jackie, giving her. Then I started passing out tissues again to them. Then all of a sudden, they both just stopped. They was whispering something to each other. I couldn't hear what it was. All of a sudden, they stopped and looked at me, and of course, you know me, I said, what? I said, I've done my job, I think. Her mother said, well, Larry, you're going to have to go and ask her father for her hand in marriage. Then, for the first time, the P word came into my head. And you know what the P word is? It was Panicville. I said, now, I want to be dating her. This is my 4th date with her. I don't think her father knew my name, long who it was. But Jackie came over and gave me a little nudge, and so I took that long walk from the kitchen through the dining room to the living room. Mr. Sisson was sitting there reading a book, and I stood over him and I said, Mr. Sisson, I'd like to ask you something. Well, he looked up with that stern face he had with that book, and I just froze. He said, what is it, Larry? And I'm standing there, and finally I said, it's kind of like getting the cart before the horse. And he says, what are you talking about? I said, well, when he said my name, Larry, that, you know, that just kind of threw me. I didn't think he knew who I was. I said, well, and I said it real fast. I said, I'd like to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. He looked at me with that stern face again, and he said, what did Jackie say? I'm just standing there like a bumper blow. He says, Larry, what did Jackie say? And I went. Well, he stood up, grabbed my hand, shook my hand, and said, welcome to the family. Well, after that, I was with her constantly. We waited a year and 1 day to get married. We got married on November 21st, 1964. And, you know, as usually before you get married, you have to go and talk to your minister. And he was sitting there talking to Jackie, going through his routine that he did many times for young couples. He got about halfway through and he stopped and he looked at me and he says, Larry, I don't have to do anything. He says, I can tell that you're very much in love with Jackie. And he says, every time I mention her name, your face just lightens up. And he says, I'm going to give you some good advice. And it's the best advice I've ever gotten. He said, starting on your honeymoon, the first night, he says, the last thing you do before you close your eyes, he said, you reach over there and give Jackie a kiss and tell her that you love her. Then he said, the first thing you do when you get up in the morning, he said, you find Jackie, you give her a kiss and tell her that you love her. And he says, everything in between there will take care of itself. And so it has. It's been a wonderful 50 years for us. So I have to go back to a little thing that Pastor Jerry said a couple of weeks ago in his sermon. Nothing happens for chance. And I think God has blessed me because I think God put Jackie there that Wednesday afternoon for me to fall in love with. So I'm standing here today to tell you I've been blessed and I'm honored and I'm proud to call this remarkable woman here my wife for 50 years. And I love her dearly. One more thing to say, and I'm speaking for both of us when I say this. If you're in this room tonight, you hold a special place in our hearts. So we just like to thank you for taking the time out of a busy holiday schedule to spend a couple hours with us celebrating our 50th anniversary. We thank you and may God bless you. And now, as usual in our house, Jackie's going to get the next one.
Okay.
Oh, she had to write hers
I had to
down.
write mine down. Larry's been memorizing this for a long time. Dear Larry, this is a special moment in time for us. 50 years ago, I pledged my love and commitment to you, but it seems like only yesterday. I promised to love you and honor you, comfort and keep you. I pledged to be by your side in sickness and in health, for better or worse, for the rest of our lives. We've had all of those things, and you've been by my side as we created a family, a home, and a life together. Today, as we renew our vows, I pledge my eternal love for you and eagerly await what life has in store for us in the future. I have been finding love notes hidden all over the house throughout our marriage, but the past anniversary month, they have been hidden in the strangest little places. But in one you wrote, the partnership formed in marriage, how the two people bring out the best in each other, and even though they may be wonderful as individuals, they are even better together. I thank you for all the joy that you have given me throughout my life. I love you more than ever. And I pray the coming years will be full of happiness and God's rich blessings. I love you.